Well, today is the first podcast of 2024. Welcome to Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary. I'm in white today because in the Brazilian culture, you wear white on New Year's. And they've got many different cultures. It's kind of fun. So, Feliz Ano Novo.
Wow, thank you very much. I am clearly in the opposite colors, so I didn't know to wear white, but
So it's a Brazilian thing, and so I've always been fascinated about different cultures and how they are, and that my wife and I travel extensively, and some of the different things that we saw this year in places like Singapore and Indonesia and Brazil. But of course, I'm steeped into the culture of Brazil now, and so it's fascinating to me how people do, different things. They don't have Thanksgiving, and yet they have Black Friday. And I told them, hey, you can't have Black Friday. You don't have Thanksgiving. And they said, oh, no, don't worry. We just stole it as a marketing tool. Since we don't have Thanksgiving, Black Friday is the whole month of November.
oh my.
But it's hilarious to be walking down the street and see a store having Black Friday sales for the whole month of November. But they literally use the English Black Friday. And so it's fascinating. But yeah, different cultures, different things, and
Different adoption of other cultures into your own. Yeah.
Exactly. No, they make a cake every year. It's a panettone. It's stolen from Italy, where they put fruit in the cake. It's
In Italy they do.
in
Yeah.
Italy they do. So in Brazil, just for the month of November, they start producing this panettone cake with brigadeiro chocolate in it, and it's heavenly. And so they've taken
is.
something from another culture and adapted it to their own.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Black-eyed peas, I know, is supposed to be an American thing.
Yeah,
I never got
in the
into the
South.
black-eyed peas. I know when I was a kid, my parents used to buy, well, we used to have a German sausage store here, and it has long since gone out of business, but you could buy the wide variety of sausages, and so I think we'd have the Weisswurst for New Year's, the white sausage.
Yes.
And so that was something I remember from childhood, but haven't done that in years and years.
I went to a friend's house today who does New Year's Day waffles every year.
Oh,
And you know this person.
I do indeed.
Anyway, we went, and it's a ways away. It's in Bernalillo. We're sitting here in Albuquerque, and you get busy, and we almost considered not doing it, but we're so happy we did. I reconnected with friends that I hadn't seen in 6 years, and turns out, small world, they're now working in the same area at Sandy National Labs that I am, and it's on almost the same things. Just got transferred a couple of days before the break, and so really interesting and fun. But I'm a big tradition person, as you know, and I think that the more you do traditions, the more we all get grounded in certain things, which allows the chaos, I think. And the more we have things that are for sure going to happen that form that foundation, the more chaos we can put up with. So I appreciated that my friend has this little tradition.
Yeah.
And we started a new one for Christmas Eve this year because we used to go to, those in Albuquerque know the story, we used to go to the Macaroni Grill after candlelight service at Faith Lutheran.
Yep, which has since burned down.
And it burned down. And so we had to figure out a new place to go. And so we started a new one at Scarpazona Academy.
Okay.
And so that was fun. But I do think that it's important to have those traditions and to carry those forward into the new year while making changes and necessary changes.
Yeah. We were talking prior to beginning this podcast about just kind of where we were. We have not seen each other since Christmas, and we were catching up a little bit and talking about some of the highs and the lows. And so there are a million different paths I think that we could go down with this podcast and talk about. But certainly we want to be mindful that while we can catch up on all of our familiar people and places and things, we want to make sure that we meet audience needs, as you all are listening from literally all over the world, which was a surprise to me as I saw some of the recapped figures about what countries were tuning in. But as always, you are more than welcome to share your traditions, your feedback, things that are important to you in your country. If you've got particular areas that you really hope that we cover in the future, please send us that feedback. We would love to hear that, and we would love to facilitate that. So as always, you can do that easily at the website, which is curiositynotjudgment.com. But one of the things that I wanted to tackle perhaps for today was, I think it's become, a little bit of a, I'm going to say tradition, is probably too strong a word, but it's become maybe the new normal for a lot of folks to get onto social media and do a year in review. To find some sort of a template or an application that'll let you do maybe 12 pictures in a snapshot, one from each month, or some sort of a photo slideshow with music, and create something that goes back and highlights the year. And so this morning I wanted to do that. I sat down and was looking through my photos over the last 12 months, and I was just astonished at all of the things that had transpired in 365 days. It absolutely was amazing to me. Everything from international travel. I had the opportunity to go to Austria and Germany with my parents, to getting the diagnosis, going through the surgeries in the summer, various stages of hair growth and head wounds, lots of travel with work in the first half of the year. You were in a bunch of pictures because you and I worked together for a season, and just the progression of time and people and activity. And I just marveled at it. I mean, truly, the life that you can pack into a year is amazing to me.
It is amazing. And when you think about, speaking of traditions, I remember my grandparents, both sides, my mom's and my dad's, were farmers in Iowa. And, they were in the same house for decades and decades. And I used to marvel at, whenever I'd go back there, how things were exactly the same. And imagine the differences between then and now, certainly back in the mid part of the 19th century, 20th century, 1900s, where people had the same life pretty much every year. And if it was on a farm, you had the same seasons, you had the same crop rotation, you had the same things that were going on every year. And now, as you say, with technology, with travel, with all the things that are going on, I mean, who was talking about AI at the beginning of last year?
Right.
And now that's what everybody's talking about. Who was talking about, many of the things that were happening. And it is amazing how much can change in 365 days. And I think it is somewhat a product of the times that we live in, and how much, we have with being able to communicate. My wife and I are watching John Adams. Highly recommend it. You can get it on a couple, Netflix, maybe Max. It's a 7-part series about the life of John Adams. And it covers the Revolutionary War time of America. Fascinating, fascinating. But there's a scene where the wife is worried because the husband hasn't written, and in months, because he had to travel to France to win some support from France for the American Revolution cause. Months. I mean, it's not like, we get nervous sometimes when we can't get a hold of somebody in hours or minutes.
Yep, that's right.
Can you imagine months and not knowing what's going on?
Well, and I can even speak just to today. My daughter was in the ER. She had an injury. And so, not only can we track each other's location now, but you can know if someone's read your text and why aren't they responding and what's going, it is absolutely night and day different from waiting for 3 or 4 months to see if your loved one has made it to wherever they're traveling, right? My goodness.
So you can imagine that we live in minutes now.
Yeah.
And they used to live in months.
Yeah.
Or even years. And we could say even minutes or seconds. And so, of course, that's going to increase the pace of our life and the pace of change in our lives. Is that good or bad?
I don't have an answer to that, because I think it really is objective, right? We've talked in the past about how technology has provided for so many things that have been such a tremendous blessing, communication among them, but it's also drastically escalated anxiety, suicide rates because of social media, etc. So it is a very mixed bag. And You said a word earlier, something about grounding, and that is a word that has come up over and over again in the last couple weeks for me. And I think I have been walking through some increase in anxiety just with stuff with family situations, stuff, works works great now. I'm finally stabilized in that, but this was a major year transition for me in work as well. And so that concept of grounding in the midst of constant fluctuation is really, really key. And full disclosure, I was at therapy on Monday. And so I had an interesting conversation with my therapist. We were talking specifically, I've been battling vertigo, nighttime vertigo. And I said, if it's not the vertigo that's disrupting my sleep, it's the fear of getting vertigo that disrupts my sleep. And sometimes I get so much in my own head that I can't get rest for days and days and days in a row because I'm afraid to let myself sink into sleep. And so she was talking about grounding and how there's all these different techniques and how to ground. And I know there's, a process of tapping where you can look that up on the internet. There's certain points, pressure points, collarbone, behind the ear, different places, forehead. You can literally just tap on your body as a technique of grounding. You can do some breathing exercises. You can take your shoes and socks off and feel the floor. Make sure you're being attentive to temperature and texture and all of those things. And what she had told me, though, is she said, probably not appropriate in the middle of the night when you're trying to sleep, but daytime anxiety, she said, if you can get out for 5 minutes and do a sensory walk and be very, very mindful of all of your senses. What do you hear? What do you see? What do you smell? What do you taste? What can you touch? And taking that 5 minutes to reorient yourself in the here and the now,
In the present.
to break that anxiety in the midst of our ever-changing world, our second by second mode of living, right? I think grounding may be my word for 2024.
It's interesting you say that. I'm a big David Allen fan. He wrote a book called Getting Things Done in the 80s, which has become kind of a productivity kind of mastermind class. And one of the things he talks about that creates anxiety is the sheer number of things that we think we need to accomplish and that our brain has not written down. So when you say present, when you say, one of the solutions to anxiety in the middle of the day is go take a sensory walk and get back into the present where you're not worried about the future or the past and we're in the present. We've talked about that in recent podcasts. I think you add into that, and back to our earlier points about pace and all the things that are opportunities for us things to do. If you go down and list, family, work, community, etc., and you start thinking, what are all the things I want to accomplish this year in that, you can come up with a list that's clearly not obtainable.
Right.
And so, if you put all that together, I can't get everything done. Am I doing the right thing? Am I worried about this situation, that situation, this relationship, that relationship? And you jumble it all together. I think you're right. I think a foundation, having that foundation, that clear, where do I go? What's my space where I can go where I feel like I'm okay?
Yeah.
And is that physical? Is that mental? Is that emotional, spiritual? What are those things that can make us feel grounded so that we can be effective and not hurried or stressed out?
I think we all have to really take some time to contemplate what those places and spaces are, because they may be a physical location. It may be a posture, like I just want to lay down and get under the covers. I want to get out and feel the sunshine on my face. It could be a ton of different places, respectively for all of us. And so I think it does warrant some thought. I will say again, my therapist said just that to me. She said, when you are trying to cope, what do you do? And she asked me, and I said, my number one default is to go to sleep. That is the easiest way to turn off the world and be done with everything. She says, well, it's a healthy coping technique if you have time to take a nap.
Yeah.
Right? And so what are the things that we need to do to ground us, to center us, to get us back into a place of stability and peace and fully present and not getting wrapped up in the anxiety? And I think these are good things to think about as we launch this new year, because we tend to begin with this fresh sense of optimism and maybe the clean sheet, so to speak, of all of these new activities that we're going to do, new ways that we're going to live, healthy eating, active lifestyles. But if we don't have a plan to tackle it, if we don't have support around us to get these things done, if we don't have community that we can press into, it just becomes more to-dos on your list to produce more anxiety, to fill your minutes and your seconds of every waking moment.
Yeah, and that's an easy thing to do. And so I think, one of the techniques that I've been practicing over these last couple of days, and it's a getting things done. There's also a new book out called Redeeming Your Time that both talk about this, and it is, writing down all your open loops, all those things, what David Allen used to call the nuts, the nagging unfinished tasks that are in your head that your mind cannot differentiate the importance of. You ascribe the weight and importance to those things with a different part of your brain. So the part of your brain that just knows there's things to do doesn't know the difference between, cleaning out the garage or getting an important medical procedure done. And so I've been writing all those down and then trying to figure out what system am I going to use to capture all those and prioritize them and figure out how to make progress against them versus just being overwhelmed. And what you're saying, though, is about how do you get grounded? How do you escape from being stressed or anxious? It starts to make me think, what if that's not available to you? Like you said, what if you can't take a nap?
Yeah.
So I would imagine that if you found something that worked really well, but you started feeling anxious and you knew that wasn't available, would it make you more anxious? So, I think a good question, or a good set of questions as we talk about, curiosity, not judgment, and especially judgment of yourself in these situations is, why do I feel anxious? Why do I get to a place where I feel anxious? And what am I anxious about? And then that's one kind of string of questions. And then the other is, what can I do about it?
Yeah.
Where can I get grounded? Where can I establish a foundation or a place where I feel more comfortable or things? And then go through the different situations in your life and make sure that you've got that place, that escape in each one of them, so that you don't blow a gasket.
Yeah. But being mindful of having a healthy escape, because you can quickly
Yes.
form new addictions that can be
No, that's
equally
right.
disastrous, whether it's I just need a drink to calm down, or
Right.
I'm just going to get on my phone. All of these things have their own pitfalls associated with them. So really navigating some healthy paths that you might be able to walk down when those things begin to build up. I feel like this podcast is a bit all over the place, but I think it's a kind of reflection of my brain today, and maybe a reflection of a lot of us that have just come through the holiday season, and now we're just on that cusp of getting back into work, back in a normal schedule. I packed up all of our Christmas decorations today, cleaned the house. I just needed that sense of normal again. And so I know that many people struggle emotionally as we come out of high holiday mode, lots of people, lots of activity, and maybe that's their happy place when they're always surrounded by noise and activity, and coming back to the still and quiet might be a bit of a depressant. And so I think there's so many things that go on in all of us this time of year that we just have to recognize. We have to see, the situation that we find ourselves in, to ask those curious questions of ourselves. Am I at peace? If not, why? Am I in anxiety? Why? To begin to walk down those curious questions so that we can hopefully get to that place of grounding. And I said it a little tongue-in-cheek that that's maybe my word for 2024, but I sincerely sense that is really going to be something that I need to focus on. Because a lot of people might say, if you're going to pick a theme for the next year, it might be adventure or peace or joy, and those are all great things. But I think at this stage in my life, I'm ready to be grounded so that whatever comes, good times, bad times, blah times, I'm grounded. And so for me, that's, I think, what I want to concentrate on for this year ahead.
It's interesting you say it in that way, because I think in my experience, I think that you're exactly right in thinking that way, because I think we can miss joy. We can miss opportunities for uh, making the world a better place for ourselves, for others, etc. Miss being able to focus on others, as we've talked about before, if we don't have that groundedness. Because if our head's all over the place, well, then how does it get to a place? How does it get to a place where good things can happen? And so I think I think that's wise. I think getting grounded, especially if you're feeling ungrounded a little bit, if there's been a bunch of changes in your life where some of the things that used to ground you are no longer serving that purpose. How do we reground? I think it's a great question for the start of the year.
Do you have a 2 or 3 minute explanation of what grounding actually means? Because obviously it comes from a science and engineering perspective, but why do we need that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I'm an electrical engineer. Grounding is often thought to be a reference point, right? Grounding is zero voltage, zero, right? It's a place where everything in a system needs to be grounded for it to work properly. And so I think it's a good analogy you bring it up. I hadn't thought of it that way before. But no, grounding, it just means having, you know, grounding also from a physics standpoint, where I'm also a major part of my studies, is if you don't have something planted, you can get into inertia and all the things around that. But from a place of grounding, then you can exert force on a situation. You can use it as a lever to do other things. And so, you know, one part of a spring, if it's not grounded, if it doesn't have attached to a foundation, it can't exert force on the other side. And so I think there's a lot of good analogies actually in science, and it's funny you bring that up. I hadn't thought about it before. But oftentimes things in nature can really show us things. You know, the fact that a system doesn't work without a proper ground is probably a good analogy for life. And so anyway, in those situations, to your question, what it provides is a reference point. It provides a anchor point. It provides a place from which things can happen, and or you can observe things happening from a given spot. And so I think that's a good way to think of it. And I would add that mentally, if we are not grounded, if we don't have a place, a reference point, and a place from which to push off, then I think our brain has a hard time thinking about where to go and what it's doing, and am I accomplishing anything?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you walking through that with me. That gives me some really good mental pictures. I just remember installing electrical outlets or replacing them and say you have to attach the ground wire, right? Because it's dangerous if you don't.
That's right.
And so I think all of those different concepts are really key to understanding why we need to have that place and space of grounding to be effective and to be observant and to be ready for inertia, right?
So what can I do as far as grounding myself? What can I do when my grounding gets disrupted? And what can I do to create places for grounding in various parts of my life so that I can be effective and that my brain feels like it's safe to go out and wander and live in a world of chaos and things happening way too fast, and to not miss those opportunities for joy and adventure.
Well, I would love to hear if you've got a word that you're kind of concentrating on for 2024 or a theme. Would be fascinated to hear what those are and why. If you've got a few minutes and want to just shoot us a comment or a message, please do that. Love to see what you guys write there in the YouTube channel, or if you want to send something by way of email, you can do that right through the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. But we'll wish you a beautiful start to the year and look forward to a whole 2024 worth of curious questions.
Take care, and let's look forward to a great year.